All right, so I'm just going to do a short conversation or introduction on modern Sudan, just to introduce the collective and how we operate as a chapter under Docomomo. So thank you for being with us today. And my name is Nour Ibrahim. If you didn't hear me introduce it, I'm the newly appointed chair of Modern Sudan Collective. I'll be guiding the conference or introducing it in the beginning. And yeah, very excited. And why we're here and why the theme of time also kind of is important to us for this conference. And so, like we said, we operate under Docomomo International. And Docomomo International is a nonprofit organization. So it's pays for the documentation and the preservation of buildings, sites, or neighborhoods after the modernist movement in 1988. And there's now over 80 chapters in the world. And therefore, we exchange ideas and we relate to conservation methods and conservation technologies and histories and educations. And at Modern Sudan Collective, it's a research-based driven collective, and it works across the architectural, archives, oral, and the cultural memories of post-colonial buildings in Sudan after the independence in 56 that should worth be of conservation. I think this is also quite important just because a lot of these buildings are politically quite charged in their build, and they've created a landscape in Sudan that kind of mimics the journey and the cycles of education of architects. The first generation of architects being those that came from abroad, mainly from Europe, to build in Khartoum and in Sudan. And then the second generation of architects being Sudanese architects that studied abroad and came back and built in Sudan. And only the third one being actually architects that studied in Sudan and built in the environment. And I think therefore there's quite a fragmented timeline that is either goes with the colonial or imperialist timeline, but also of what was culturally of relevance at the time. And therefore, there's always these suspended returns and these kind of delayed futures with these buildings. And therefore, when you talk about specific buildings, it's more so about what was kind of the context that charged for this building to be be built and prioritized. We also have a lot of researches that we develop. We write a lot of fiches on these buildings. And that's why I think Modern Sudan Collective particularly, it's invested on this conservation as a non-linear or universal timeline. We don't really do them in chronological order, but more so on different kind of pockets of hierarchies that we see within the cultural fabric, or what is missing. We have a 3D modeling team as well that develops also quite extensive 3D models from images and point clouds, often from social media or very, very old archives of buildings, such as here, the cinemas, for example, or public buildings that, haven't been open in Sudan perhaps for a couple of decades, but had quite a monumental or typological importance at the time, after the independence. And therefore, we kind of engage with the preservation, the authorship, and the times itself. Um, and therefore, these infrastructural buildings or public buildings to kind of just be housed or archived in multiple different formats, if it's writing or 3D publications. I think what's really interesting and nice as well is that because we're quite dispersed around the globe, we all also kind of practice in different niches. If some of us are more into research, 3D modeling, as I previously said, more anthropology, historians, researchers, as myself, so or designers in practice. And I think that tension kind of brings different outcomes for the collective. And so, therefore, those of us that are more into journalism and writing have contributed in these publications to talk about Modern Sudan Collective. We also have a dialogue series that we started last year, run by Reem and Dua, which also kind of added a layer, I think, of freshness of, for example, um, non-nostalgic, but also nostalgic return in terms of like the Sudanese landscape currently. And what does that currently mean? And these conferences and dialogue series kind of work parallels to each other. And we bring speakers to kind of house a series of these conversations. So we want to acknowledge on everyone that joins us today from across the different locations, disciplines, and time zones. And therefore, I think it's the presence that kind of continues this conference across the day today, which will be really exciting to kind of see. And honestly, to invite to listen and to question whenever you want to. Um, I think the moderators are going to try to also allow for any questioning or any discussions to happen when needed. Um, and therefore, I'd like to open Modern Conversations 3, which is on time. Next will be followed by Uta.
To that. So I talk a bit about maybe the history of Docomomo, not too long, but in particular about our current initiatives and aims for the coming years, which I guess will also be very relevant for all of our national working parties. You may recognize this picture. That is the TU Delft campus in the Netherlands, where our headquarters is currently based. But that is also a campus which is quite representative for post-war modernism as well, and reflecting some or representing some of the building typologies that we just saw in your pictures right before, Nour. I don't have to talk maybe too much about that. You already explained Docomomo is an NGO, but maybe just shortly to say where the funny name comes from. That is what people usually remember when they hear Docomomo. So that stands for Documentation Conservation of Building Sites and Neighborhoods. So it's not just the building, but it's also the, let's say, urban level or maybe other kind of compounds, neighborhoods that we are looking at of the modern movement. And the main ideas that were back then in 1989, when my colleagues Hubert Jan Henkert and Wessel de Jonge, the two founders back then in Eindhoven, formulated were maybe three main aspects. Act as a watchdog, so to document buildings under threat, exchange idea, to be an open platform. And that is very important for us. We are not following any, let's say, very formal rules, though we have a small constitutions, but we in particular want to foster exchange of ideas, but of course also of activities, and with the goal to foster the interest in modern architectural heritage, not just based on the building and on the physical aspects itself, but also based on the intangible aspects that are incorporated, and think about how these recent architectural inheritance also shapes our future. And maybe there are two key works that I like to highlight, although I think Back to Utopia might only be available in libraries. We have not published it online yet. That is a book that was published by Hubert Jan Henkert, who was here actually 2 years ago, also with me for the first conference, and Hilde Heinen, who is you may know, professor in Leuven University. And they talked about what is the modern movement and how is it defined, and that we in particular are interested also in the innovations that were brought by and can be brought by also by architecture and by shaping our environment. And on the left side is the document that was also formulated, and we probably have it online because it was one of the very first journals and proceedings. It was a reflection of Hubert Jan Henkert about how many modern buildings are part of the World Heritage List, and that was back in, I think, 97, when he did this exercise. And back then, there were just very few sites that had been listed. Maybe it was 92. So there was Brasilia as one of the first cities listed in World Heritage, I think in the 80s. Of course, the Bauhaus building in Dessau. And I think it was the famous cemetery of Leverens in Sweden. And that was another aspect to think about: how much should modern movement architecture be represented also in World Heritage lists. But coming maybe back to the question how we exchange, I think one of the most important formats is or are our international conferences. Conferences like this one, organized by Docomomo Sudan, online. But of course, we have to say back then, 1990, these technologies were not available yet. And as you can see, the conference from 1990 up to 2020-21 in Tokyo, which was the conference in under the condition of COVID. This was the first hybrid conference with the Japanese people in Japan attending the conference and the rest of the world attending online. And all other conferences were traditional formats that took place on site and in presence. And since then, since Tokyo, we are actually following the format of also hybrid possibilities. This was done in the Valencia conference in Santiago de Chile in 24, and it will also be done like this in Los Angeles. You may know that the next international conference is in just 2 months from the mid-March in Los Angeles, and we know how challenging it will be for many of our global members, like from Sudan and many other countries, to travel there, not just because of the current political and visa issues, but just simply also because of it might be a very expensive trip. So in that sense, I may also invite you and others already to our next conference that is already scheduled for 28 in Athens, which might be easier to reach and will take place in September. Yeah, we're still looking for a location for 2030. Just a short glimpse. The conference organized by Docomomo US and the Southern California Docomomo chapter. So here we will also challenge this question of what is the modern movement and what is the scope of our work. Nour was just talking about the fact that, of course, in Sudan, you started with the post-colonial and architecture after 1956 in Sudan, when the national state was founded. In the US also, there is always has been a discussion about the late modernism. When did the modern movement stop? And you see, of course, it's also a kind of provocative invitation of Tom Main as a keynote speaker. And we are very happy to have Hiba Gasim, who you see on the third photo, the founder, one of the founders of Docomomo, who is now 85. He will also give his reflection on his thoughts about what is the modern movement back then. And we have a Mexican young architect, Frida Escobedo, who is working currently, I think, on the extension of a museum in New York, where we have another practicing architect dealing with modern architecture, modern movement architecture. Maybe one thing I like to say, you see we have 36 sessions and 2 roundtables. The roundtables and the keynotes will be shown also online. As I said, it's a hybrid format. I guess you still have to register for online participation on the website, but the roundtables will and the keynotes will be, and some other sessions might be online. And so just have a look to the conference website. And one of the roundtables will be moderated by me, and I will come back to that. It will be about digital documentation. And I was very happy to hear Nour and to hear that Docomomo Sudan has a 3D modeling team. I will come back to that with my last slide. Just to see the schedule and also to invite you as chair and boards of Docomomo Sudan. So the council meeting has already been scheduled. It will be during lunchtime. Of course, also difficult to reach for people in Europe and Asia. But of course, everybody is invited to take part, the board members, the national representatives, to take part in our council meeting. For those of you who are not so familiar, the council meeting is, of course, the official body of Docomomo, where we take decisions on, yes, new members, for example, but also on the reports of our specialist committees and so forth. Yeah, this was shown. We currently have 85 chapters, and we have received 2 applications. I was just saying these new applications will be approved in the council meeting. Currently, we have the applications of Bangladesh and Uruguay, and we still hope to get some more. We also hope for an application of Ethiopia, and maybe today there might be some of the colleagues from Ethiopia who will also join your conference here to see how the national working parties may organize themselves. Yes, just this is our architecture faculty in Delft, and there is the building where our headquarter is currently placed. Our headquarter means it's me as the chair of Docomomo, it's Vido Quist, my colleague, as the secretary general, and Sofio Katkarze, our secretariat, the person you are in charge with if you have any questions about memberships, if you want to publish something on our website, or have any other questions, then Sofio is your point of contact for those things. This is our working plan. You see, I started to talk about the conferences. Just to let you know, in 22, we moved the headquarter. That means a lot of material as well from Lisbon, the former headquarter, to Delft. And then our work in a way is scheduled, or the rhythm is given by the international conferences. And I have put in red also the chapters we approved in the conferences 22 and 24. And yeah, hopefully there might be more applications even coming up. We are still in conversation with some other countries in the Los Angeles conference. And in between, and if you look at the first timeline, which was our first mandate from 22 to 25, we were mainly working on questions of open access in making the material, the books, the proceedings, and the Docomomo journal open access. And I think we're quite happy with the result of that, but we are not done yet with this process. So for the second mandate, which is from 26 to end of 29, we have another initiative, which you see in the middle of the page, Docomomo 3D. Again, coming back to that, which is about using new technologies instead of Word and PDF only to work on the documentation work that has also been shared by Nour in her introduction, the famous fishes, the homework, the documentation we are doing. And of course, there are currently buildings and information coming in from our working parties. And I just want to encourage you also to share any information of buildings, of, I don't know, initiatives that are taking place to destroy buildings. One of our last actions was the photo on the right, the modern so-called Generalstab, a ministry building in Belgrade in Serbia, that is a listed building, was destroyed during the NATO bombing and was supposed to be demolished based on a law to give place for a redevelopment by Trump, actually, by American investors. So far as we know, this law has not passed. It was a joint initiative of ICOMOS, of Europa Nostra, and others together with Docomomo International. But of course, the most important thing were the initiatives of people on site that were also protesting against these things, against this demolition and against this change of law. Very briefly, also this year, hopefully for the Los Angeles conference, we will publish a new overview of our national chapters. That is the documentation of the homework of 24. You can see that Docomomo has done selections from the register, as we call it, in 2002 and 2007. Those are not yet published. Yes, the 2007 is online. It was a Docomomo journal. And the 26 will be a book, open access for download, and with printing on demand. But let's come to the Docomomo journal. I really would love all of you to make use of the many articles that are published in the Docomomo journal. The covers you see here is only the production we did since 2022, since that is the new layout when the headquarters moved to Delft. There are many more online that had been produced the decades before. It's a peer-reviewed journal, and with 2 printed issues per year. And we also introduced, you see it in gray, a new open issue that is only online available. And when we have a look to the visibility of the journal, it was also our aim, or it still is our aim, to make the journal not just a journal of the Docomomo network and community, but to make it an academic resource that is also quoted by other journals, by other publications. And we are getting better, but we still would like to ask all of you, all our members, and those of you who are writing, to also quote and reference our journal in other articles. And that made us think that we might also introduce some more academic research-based articles in the journal in the future. But of course, we want to stay and be the journal of our Docomomo network, and many of those journals are curated or guest edited by members from the national working parties and so forth. I will just share one of it later. But what you could see is that at least the downloads have really increased over the last years, in particular also in the last year. You see that we have a kind of steady download that is above 15,000 or 16,000 articles. Has increased here in September, but in general, it has really gone up from a few thousand to more than 10, 15,000, approaching the 20,000 downloads per month of the articles. We are doing books. I think the modernism in Africa was already also highlighted by Nour, because we have a contribution from Sudan. The modern heritage was the publication of the Docomomo Rehabilitation Award. And just to let you know that we aim for another award in the near future. Most likely, we will collect the potential applicants for that prize with the Docomomo homework of 27. So you can already keep in mind that with the homework 27, we will ask for best practice projects of rehabilitation, to be the body of potential projects that we would like to award. And we know that most of the awards that were given in 21 are coming from rather the global north and from the Americas and from Europe, and very little examples still from Asia, not to talk about Africa, even I think only one from Latin America. So we hope with that homework call of 27 to also reach out to many of our members and to have a bit different view on this prize. If you have in mind to do a book, we have a Docomomo book series. As said, the landscape architecture was the first one to be published last year. We offer this support for any of you who are interested in an open access publication and with a printing on demand option. This is the book to come, the selections from registers. So we have more than 60 countries represented there out of our 85 current working parties. And the Africa book, if you like, this is really open access. And I think this book was based on several research projects, and it was also requested by the German Federal Ministry, who funded this publication in particular to be open access. We know how difficult it is in many countries to purchase book or to afford books. So please feel free to share this code and to share this publication. And just to give you a glimpse, we really wanted to involve younger researchers. And I think I could also put here many photos of the Sudanese members, because you also worked as a team on the Sudanese chapter, I think with 6 or 7 authors. These were fellows from West and East Africa who were funded. The countries participating, and you see that Sudan, with Docomomo Sudan, was one of the countries very actively involved. We also worked with photographers. In that case, not Jean Molitor, who was taking a lot of the pictures of the other countries. We could find, we wanted to place photos here in the beginning that were not documented in the articles. They might not all be from the post-colonial area. But we also understand these are just 2 of the examples you presented, the German pavilion, the Friendship Hall, and both of them heavily influenced by other countries and architects from other countries, mainly Germany and China in this case. So we are very happy that you continue working to unravel the history and the origin of the Sudanese modern movement after 56 and the creators and architects that were involved in those works. Yes, and just as I think a last outlook, imperfect modernism, I think we were very happy to have Liutauras and Katarina from Lithuania to work on this book. We had a call for paper with a lot of participation, and among them was also May Abusila, another member of Docomomo Sudan, who participated in that call and spoke about the Sudan National Museum in her article. Again, the journal is open access. And I want to close with, impressions to come. These 2 photos from Ethiopia, where I was lucky to be the first time last November to visit the country. We hope very much to have more African chapters that document this fantastic work here at the Africa Hall, a renovated piece in Ethiopia. And closing with that, I come to our future initiative, and I would be very lucky to have the modeling team of Docomomo Sudan involved in this initiative, where we would love to extend our website into a 3D archive. We are currently working on that to have different forms of representations like HBIM or Gaussian splatting, maybe VR experiences to come into a 21st century experience of Docomomo. And with that, I would like to close. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.